And no series embellishes this so perfectly as for our first example, Porkin Across America.
I'm Jim Haggerty. You know me as the host of Today Now, but I've also eaten in a ton of restaurants. Now I'm heading out on the road. My mission? Find the best pork our country has to offer. And I won't stop until I hit all 50 states. This is Jim Haggerty, Porkin' Across America.
Porkin' Across America follows Jim Haggerty, the host of another Onion show, Today Now, as he travels across the US trying to find the best pork that America has to offer. The series doesn't give us the best first impression of Jim though, as he quickly comes off as quite brash and pretty full of himself, like most food reality show hosts tend to be.
Finally, some good fucking food.
But Porkin' Across America is our chance to finally see what goes on with these people behind the camera, in between episodes. Jim is shown to be a negligent husband and father, as shown through the many telephone conversations he has with his wife.
There's dark water flooding in the laundry room. You have to come home and check this out.
Well, I can't turn around now. I'll be back in 10 weeks. Just leave it till then. I don't know what you think I'm going to be able to do. Am I a plumber?
You have to deal with this.
I am dealing with this. I'm telling you to call Armando and write him a check. I mean, I can't just drop everything. This is my show, and these people are depending on me, and I have to be here to eat the pork.
Episode 1 follows him to his first pork restaurant, and immediately, Jim comes off as generally absent-minded and oblivious to what those around him think of him.
It's times like these I thank God I'm not an observant Jew.
Upon speaking to the owner, Jim seems to be unfamiliar with very ubiquitous knowledge. After being shown their cooking process and how they cook the ribs until the meat falls off the bone, Jim comments on how
It's almost like muscle.
Most of meat is muscle.
or in a later conversation,
You know, it's amazing how before you cooked it, this meat was all cold and red.
after which Jim receives another call from his wife.
Where are you?
I'm at the
ruined
pork
and the neighbors are
restaurant,
furious.
Deb. How have you still not taken care of this?
It's just like when Tommy was getting beat up at school and you stayed at your stupid upfront.
That was another problem that you made a big deal out of that ended up solving itself.
We had to put him in a different school.
Oh, I thought the bully died.
And after a heated exchange, gets hung up on and goes back to eating. This is where he begins to stress eat, and upon being offered some strawberry pie, Jim refuses it and says he can only eat pork. So that was episode 1 of Porkin' Across America. It was all relatively tame for the first episode of an Onion series, except some of the strange comments made by Jim. Very quickly, I noticed the series trying to bring attention to the differences between Jim and Moses in terms of class. Like I said before, Jim seems to be a fucking dumbass. He doesn't know how food is prepared, and there was even a moment where he couldn't understand how Moses pronounced the word pepper.
A little salt and pepper for flavor.
I'm sorry I missed that. The salt and what?
Salt and pepper.
That's right out of my cookbook. I'm a big salt fan.
Jim likely doesn't do any of his own cooking at home and probably eats out or caters a lot of his food, considering that it seems like he's always working. Never mind the fact that he gives Moses a whole wad of cash to pay for his meal.
Hey, our food doesn't cost this much.
Money seems to be no object for Jim. Episode 2 is when things really start to go wrong for Jim. I know I said he seemed like an asshole, and he's continuously neglecting his wife by dodging her phone calls, but this episode opens up with Jim being told that his dog is being put down for attacking another dog at their kennel.
Mr. Haggerty, I'm calling to inform you that your dog Nation killed another dog staying at a kennel last night.
And despite this, and his ongoing feud with his wife, Jim still carries himself as if nothing is happening and goes on with the show.
She's dead now.
Who's ready for pork?
The series then cuts to Jim at a new restaurant, with its owner giving Jim a taste of a delicacy known as Danish Con. While unknowingly drinking it, Jim is told what it actually is, being pig's blood, but seemingly doesn't hear because he gets a call from his neighbor.
Plumber said the pipes burst because they were backed up with trash, like magazines, newspapers, rags, and toothbrushes.
Uh-huh.
That's it.
Well, but what was blocking the trash from leaving?
What do you mean? Did you intentionally flush garbage down the toilet?
Well, yeah, everything with my name and address on it. And that's why my identity's never been stolen.
Because of all of the stress, Jim unknowingly drinks more pig's blood, which he has apparently taken a liking to, and before the episode's end, Jim receives a divorce notice from his wife on camera, and comes to a shocking realization that what he had been drinking all day had been pig's blood.
Hey, how about some more con? This stuff is fantastic. I'm gonna make this at home every day.
That might be a little tough, considering most supermarkets don't sell fresh pig's blood.
This is pig's blood?
And this would start the disturbing trend of Jim wanting to consume more pig's blood, raw pork, and so much so that he eventually becomes a pig himself. Jim pretty much destroys the lives of everyone he touches. But he doesn't go throughout the series completely unscathed. Through various events, Jim slowly becomes a human pig because of the various injuries he incurs throughout the series. The first of which involves him biting into a burrito that he had left the bones inside, thinking that they would soften up by the time he ate them. This ends up with him shearing a hole through his hard palate, which would be patched up with a graft from a swine palate instead of a human palate because Jim apparently no longer had insurance. But Jim still presses on as usual, with no major changes to his appearance. His next injury, happening in episode 5, occurs after he goes after a phone he dropped into a scalding pot, giving him third-degree burns on both of his arms, as well as his torso and back. And since Jim still didn't have insurance,
we went with the most affordable option, which was pigskin.
And this is the first time Jim's person visibly changes after an injury, and sadly won't be the last. Later in episode 6, Jim collapses completely out of nowhere. He wakes up in the hospital and is told that he had a massive coronary episode and that he now has a pig's heart. His body was apparently attacking his human organs, and because of that, Jim's heart, lower intestine, liver, and pancreas have now all been swapped out for pig organs. Jim looks shocked, but says all this makes sense considering all the pig's blood he's been drinking, and then he utters this disturbing line saying,
I am pig?
I don't want to spoil everything, but the final injury Jim deals with is with a grill exploding upon him igniting it, giving him third-degree burns all over his head and causing all of his hair to burn off. His head now resembles his arms, and unfortunately enough for him, he had just placed a toy pig's nose on his face that is now fused to his head because of the explosion. This causes Jim to have a nervous breakdown where he goes full pig mode, ditching all his cast members and driving all the way home so that he can make amends with his wife. He oinks and cries all the way home, and eventually begs and pleads on his knees for his wife to take him back.
I'm just here to be the husband I should have been all along. I'm sorry. I need you. I apologize.
He realizes that the love he needed didn't come from being famous or his show, but her and his children. He promises to never put Pork above his family again, but it's not enough. She reminds Jim that they're divorced and that he needs to go away and never come back.
Get away, or I'm calling the police.
It's just the skin and the nose.
Finally having lost everything, his looks, his fame, and his family, Jim assaults the cameraman and runs off, never to be seen again. Until episode 8. Titled Today Now, happening an undisclosed time after episode 7, episode 8 is a news broadcast about a farmer that has had a new strange visitor to their farm, a human pig, and no one knows where he came from or why it looks the way he does. After the news broadcast, the show then cuts to Harry Kelson, the man who found the human pig, and he's being talked to by the person that most likely lined up this news appearance in the first place. He's promising him that he can turn the human pig into a star.
Listen, America is gonna fall in love with your human pig, and we'd love for him to partner up with our network. He could make personal appearances, he could have his own reality show, we could make him a star.
Harry tells him no, but then the man tries to convince him by telling him that they need someone to present an American Music Award tonight, and that they want it to be the human pig. Harry then says the only fair thing to do would be to ask the pig himself.
Pig? What do you think? Gonna be a big celebrity and have your own show, or would you rather stay here with your family? It's truly a tempting offer, but I think he's made his choice. He seems really happy here.
And a series ends on a note from the former Jim Haggerty.
There's nothing more important than family.
Episode 8 is, in my opinion, an allegory for the life of Jim Haggerty. That proposition that agent proposed to Harry, of promising him money and fame if he were to sign with their network, is likely the same thing that happened to Jim long ago. Jim Haggerty is, or was, the host of Today Now. He was so popular as the Today Now host that he was likely given his own series in the Onion cinematic universe. Reality TV hosts are meant to have manufactured, upbeat personalities, but at the same time, be as impersonal and inoffensive as possible as to not alienate any of its viewers. And while Jim doesn't do this perfectly considering he's supposed to be a parody, he still tries to act like a reality TV food host would, giving praise to all the food he eats, even when it looks especially putrid. However, because of the various things happening to his life off camera, Jim can no longer continue this facade. Jim is expected to go on with the show, even while dealing with his divorce and his loved ones dying. But this is all to say that you never know what's going on in the lives of these reality TV hosts. No matter what, no matter how fucked up your life is, the show must go on. Everyone involved has to hide their true thoughts and emotions so that the viewer viewer is never inclined to question anything, so that they don't change the channel and just keep consuming. This is what Jim tried to do, but at a certain point, it had just become too much. And when Jim had eventually learned his lesson, having realized the importance of family, and was finally able to make a sound decision, it was too late. He had become part of a new family. And like Jim always said, there's nothing more important than family.
6 sexy Americans, alone in a house with nothing to do but get nasty. This is Sex House.
Welcome to Sex House!
Unlike Porkin Across America, Sex House follows an entire cast of characters as they all live together for 3 months without access to their phones or the internet. The only things they have to entertain themselves are each other, and there are cameras placed all over the house capturing whatever debaucherous bullshit the group gets into. Each participant is introduced one by one, and it's learned why everyone has come to Sex House. Jay is your typical jock, a self-described sex lover, and only really here to get his dick wet. Erin's an 18-year-old girl from a small town who's here to try and break out of her shell. Derek is the only black and gay guy on the show and is here to meet a bunch of hot guys. Tara's a proud skank, an ex-cheerleader who always gets her way. Frank's a 45-year-old man that has a wife and 2 kids and is here pretty much only to talk and make friends. And Alex is a polysexual princess who's really in tune with her sexuality and here to express herself. After everyone is introduced and everyone begins feeling comfortable, the group receives an oncoming sex from the producers, telling them to commemorate their first night of Sex House with a party. The party starts out okay, but after a while, it doesn't seem like everyone's getting along. Jay, Tara, and Erin all are having fun talking to one another, but Derek seems to be striking out. Not because he has no riz, but because it seems like no one else on Sex House is gay.
I find it impossible to believe that they didn't cast another gay guy. That would be a major oversight.
Alex's horniness is turning off everyone, and Frank's old ass is absolutely bombing with the ladies. As the night continues though, and the alcohol begins to set in, everyone starts feeling a bit more comfortable. Erin reveals that she is a virgin, which really seems to appeal to Jay.
Wow. I already wanted to hook up with you, but that's a new level.
And for some reason, after she says this, the camera cuts to Frank smiling and hangs on him a bit. After a little more partying, the night's finally coming to a close. Before the party ends though, Tara notices that Frank seems to really be losing his awkwardness.
Frank is drinking a lot and he's really impressing everyone.
The camera then cuts to Erin and Frank dancing together, both visibly drunk. As they begin talking to one another, the two continue slow dancing together to everyone's disdain, and Frank eventually pops the question and they go upstairs, making Frank and Eric the first 2 characters that have sex on Sex House. Which brings us to the end of episode 1. Like all the Onion's other properties, episode 1 is played pretty straight, considering that this is also a parody. Sex House is all the holdings of your typical reality TV show, and to be more specific, intentionally reeks of being made in the late 2000s. It has all the archetypal characters, the dumb blonde, the horny jock, the kinky emo girl, the cheesy music and edits, and all the manufactured drama that comes with the territory.
Derek's a drama queen and a liar. I know he wants to me.
There isn't much to say about the characters at this point, but what you may have noticed was that there were certain things that felt very off about the Sex House. For example, when Jay walked into one of the many bedrooms, he noticed one of the light bulbs was flickering. At a later point, Erin accidentally breaks a handle off of a door, and the walls here also seem paper thin. Whatever this place is, I'm not sure the cast will be able to stay here for too long. The day after in episode 2, after everyone's hungover and is looking for something to eat, they all realize that there's only alcohol in the fridge. Frustrated, Derek tries to leave Sex House from the front door, only to find out that the door is locked, and he reminds us that the producers took their phones, and that they don't have internet access. Derek begins to snoop around a bit more, only for him to find out that the building's walls have been fortified and that its windows have been boarded up. It also seems like the Sex House doesn't have traditional air conditioning or heating, and that its temperature is regulated by vents that blast extremely hot and cold air at different intervals. While all this has been going down, Erin has been trying to take her mind off things after what happened with Frank by watching some TV. But it turns out that the only thing the channels play here is porn. Erin realizes that everything inside Sex House, the lack of food, and the fact that only porn is playing on the TVs is all done in order to facilitate them having sex. If they don't fuck, they don't eat. And as discovered by Derek, they don't have access to the outside world, and slowly come to realize that this isn't the 3-month-long vacation they thought it would be, but a 3-month-long dive into purgatory. And things only get more disturbing and brutal from here. Episode 3 opens up with Jay and Tara trying to have sex. They've been the only characters to really hit it off so far, but they admit that they couldn't because there was a rotten smell coming through the floorboards. At this point in the series, Derek is the only person who really seems to understand the gravity of the situation they're all in, and the rest of the group are just carrying on as normal. Around this time, a repairman comes to the door in order to fix a Sibian that had been acting up, and Derek asks him if he has any food.
I don't know why Derek has to ruin everyone's fun here. I know you're gay, dude, but Sibians can go in asses too, homie.
Derek's inquisitive self then does more snooping around the house and figures out that all the clocks they have are running at different speeds.
I decided to call a house meeting because the clocks are all running at completely different speeds and there is no way to tell the time.
Derek tries to bring this up to the group, but is then distracted by a comedian and pole dancer that the producers brought in. The pole dancer is tasked to teach the girls how to dance, and while doing so, is shot by a blast of extremely hot air, causing her to fall and break her leg. Security is then brought in to recover her, frightening everyone, and Derek says,
"We need to figure out how to get out of here or we might actually die."
The group then receives another incoming sext, telling them that the first pair to have sex wins a prize. Derek tells everyone to refuse, and Frank, having had enough, grabs the iPad and throws it against the wall. And this would mark the beginning of everyone realizing the gravity of their situation, and the beginning of the group's rebellion against Sex House. Despite all their best efforts, during the next couple episodes, their situation only gets worse. Episode 4 begins with Alex saying,
"We can't take the garbage outside, so it started to really smell."
And the only thing they've had to eat has been pumpernickel bread, but it's been ransacked by white mold, likely fostered by the blast of extremely hot and cold air inside Sex House. But not only that, the white mold has gotten everywhere. Episode 5 begins with a doctor being brought in to figure out why no one is having sex. Here's a hint. It's the fact that everyone's malnourished and is living in what is basically a garbage can. And then the doctor and producer have this conversation.
So how's everything looking? This is out of control. I'm surprised they make 3 more days. They're completely malnourished. You're not feeding them correctly. You're not even supplying water. We're okay, right? No, we are not okay. These people are sick. Okay, you know what? We'll figure something out.
Instead of, giving everyone 3 meals a day and other basic necessities, the producer reveals that they just signed a sponsorship deal with a banana company, who just supplied the group with a free supply of sexy bananas. So many, in fact, that the group couldn't fit them into the fridge. So the ones left out began to rot and start attracting flies. Finally having had enough, Derek and the group begin to petition against the producers, saying,
"We want someone to take away the trash, the mold, and the flies. We want regular food deliveries, not bananas. We want no more air horns, and we don't want to be coerced into any more sex acts."
And you know how the producers respond to this? By completely scoffing at the group's request and telling them that on the bright side, they found a cost-effective measure to kill all the flies inside Sex House. Episode 8 is where things come to a peak. Having had enough, the group comes up with a plan to take back control of Sex House and do something so drastic that the producers will have no choice but to give in to their demands. But in order to do so, they need to get one of the producers, or someone related to them, to enter Sex House unknowingly. And it ends up being the Sibian repairman from episode 3. The group ambushes him, and Jay and Derek carry him all the way to the room that's been ransacked by white mold, handcuffing him to the ceiling and holding him for ransom. They all steal his tools in an effort to break out, to no avail. To try and put an end to this, the producers send in a masked man with a police baton, so everyone runs off to a locked room. Even the cameramen that have been recording everything so far. But Frank isn't able to make it. Frank tries to talk some sense into the masked man, but fails. And then the masked man proceeds to beat the fuck out of Frank, almost to death. Having overheard the brawl, everyone thinks Frank has been killed, and that the masked man is coming for them next. Everyone prepares to fight him off, but it turns out to be Frank.
I wasn't afraid of dying because I thought I had already died.
After all this happened and things have started to mellow, Derek says that they should let the repairman go. The group go to check on him, only to find out that he's dead, being all consumed by the mold that was originally around him. They decide to chain up the masked man, and then they receive one more command from the producers.
"You are murderers. You could have had it all, Sex House. You could have all been rich, but you chose to be selfish.
No!
You have no choice.
No!
Have sex."
Finally, the episode ends with what is hopefully the final instance of Frank revolting. Episode 9 opens up on a sour note, with no one in the Sex House speaking to each other because they're all assuming their roles.
We were abandoned by the network. It has been 12 Christs since they left us, but we've built a life here.
They formed a new society within Sex House and began speaking in Old English dialect. Alex, for example, is taking care of Derek, who's sick, and is responsible for restricting the spread of mold within the house. Erin has had her child, and Frank has stepped up to take care of them. Jay is now known as Chief Barley Horticulturist, who's in charge of maintaining their barley crops, but Jay says they're low on crops this season, and Alex says they may have to resort to eating the frogs the producers let run around in the house. Erin and Frank agree for the sake of their baby, but Tara's opposed to this because she's been caring for them as pets all this time. It's decided during house council that they are to eat all the frogs, and right when Alex is about to puncture one, Tara comes out of nowhere trying to stop her. Jay grabs her to prevent her from doing so, and during the struggle gets knocked into a wall, making this happen. Finally, after all this time, the group is able to escape. Aaron's child can finally have a normal life. Frank can go back to his wife and kids, and Derek can get the medical attention that he so desperately needs. They can put these traumatic 3 months, or 12 crisps behind them, and go back to living their normal, everyday lives. This window puts the group into shock, who can't help but stare at the new face looking at them from outside. They continue to stand and stare, until Alex says this.
We should put it back up.
Everyone agrees, and they put the barricade back up. Ominous music begins to play, and then the group goes back, continues their sacrifice of the frogs they need to continue their lives in Sex House.
It's a sexy thing to do.
Until episode 10, titled Reunion. This episode is far removed from the events of Sex House, and is all about the cast recounting their journeys across season 1, and where life after the show has taken them. And despite all the traumatic shit that happened to them, on camera no less, everyone says that Sex House was a fulfilling experience, and they were honored to have been on the show.
It had its highs and lows, but I'd do it again in a heartbeat.
The producer, who's interviewing everyone, then goes around asking how life has been since season 1 ended, starting with Aaron.
Well, what everyone wants to know is, how's the baby?
I honestly have no idea. I gave her up for adoption to a wealthy couple.
He continues going around asking everyone questions, and a common trend among the participants seems to be that everyone has started monetizing their fame and have become bloggers. Jay and Frank have become business partners and are actually going around trying to sell a script they put together to Hollywood. Derek has a big announcement saying,
I'm heterosexual now.
Oh my goodness.
He also works as a restaurant manager, and of course has a blog. The producers then ask if anything that was filmed for Sex House was left on the cutting room floor, and he receives some surprisingly real answers.
We had a lot of free time, and at one point, we weren't even sure if time was even moving.
We believed the house was some sort of purgatory, and we had to expiate our sins in order to escape.
It's also said that scientists found that the white mold found within the house apparently acts as an effective vaccine against dengue fever, and Tara has capitalized on this by delivering white mold to those who need it most, and blogging about the exotic Filipino food she eats on her trips. The producer then moves on to Alex, bringing up how she didn't get any action on Sex House, but has managed to find love after the fact. Her new man's name is Paul, and apparently him and Alex have met before. He was the voice from the loudspeaker that repeatedly told them to fuck on Sex House.
Breathe normally, prepare for mist.
And finally, there's a recap, and then a trailer for Sex House Season 2. Sex House begins as a lighthearted parody of reality shows to a full-blown genre deconstruction with copious amounts of black comedy by its end. Episode 9 and 10 are two sides of the same coin. In episode 9, the cast has gone tribal within the house after being abandoned by the producers. Jay, who started off as your typical jock, becomes a caring tribesman and sweethearted farmer.
We'll keep some of the frogs so that they can breed, and then we'll eat those frogs. I don't know much about amphibian husbandry, but I'll learn.
Frank has become a respected member of the cast, becoming a leader, leading the group's exercise sessions so that their muscles don't atrophy, and is also responsible for maintaining peace with the fellow cameraman tribe.
We have made a life here, as the abandoned camera crew has made a life here. We do not speak to them, nor they to us. It is a tenuous peace.
And Tara has become the loving mother for all the frogs the producers released into the house, who are a direct parallel to the members of Sex House.
I'll feed you whether you have sex or not, my lovelies.
They've all unknowingly developed Stockholm Syndrome, and after being traumatized by Sex House, they are comfortable staying within it after gaining back their agency and independence from the producers. Episode 10, on the other hand, begins with the cast having somehow escaped from Sex House, and they have for some reason all lost their character development and have become vapid reality stars on the outside, even remembering the events of the show with fondness. It's not revealed what happened between episodes, if the housemates have been brainwashed, drugged, or even if they really are the same people. Everyone's monetizing their time on Sex House by starting up a blog. Derek has come out as heterosexual, suppressing his true self in an effort to become as mainstream as possible. Alex has finally found love, although with a former employee of Sex House, speaking to the parasocial relationships viewers sometimes develop with the cast of reality shows.
During the show, I felt like I could really fall for you. Afterwards, I copied your address from your W4 and followed you around town until we accidentally met one day.
And Alex is none the wiser to her disturbing circumstances. And then the series ends on a trailer for Sex House Season 2. And I'm sorry to say that there is no Sex House Season 2. But back in the day, if you clicked on the annotation linking to Sex House Season 2, it would bring you to a playlist including all the episodes of Sex House Season 1. This, I think, speaks to how easily bingeable and how addicting reality TV show can be, and how if you've seen one, you've seen them all. It truly is an endless cycle. There unfortunately isn't much documentation about the development of either of these series, and in terms of why The Onion didn't continue making shows like this, let's just take a look at Sex House's view counts. While Sex House did manage to pull in over 100 million views across 10 episodes, the only episodes that had respectable viewership upon premiere were episodes 1 and 2, with both episodes having 33 million views at this time. Meanwhile, episode 3 had 7.3 million, and the series finale only had 2.9 million, an 89% decrease in viewership. Considering all that goes into creating television level productions, I highly doubt that despite its quality, Sex House managed to make its money back. The first couple episodes likely managed to pull in people because of its eye-catching title, but perhaps Sex House's premise was a bit too niche for general audiences, who say just weren't fans of The Onion's satirical sense of humor. But The Onion's fans sure damn were, and because of us, the series is still remembered to this day. As recently as 2021, Sex House would be mentioned in an interview on an online magazine called Vulture. I've seen both series discussed on Twitter, and you can even review either of them on Letterboxd. But this is all to say that I hope you all leave this video feeling a bit more informed, and I'd suggest you still watch both series if you enjoyed this. Both series left a profound impact on me, and I think without having seen them, I would have been much less inclined to pursue writing in the ways that I have, and I may not even have this YouTube channel. So with all that being said, this has been Nolo as Fuck, thanks for watching, until next time.